welcome back to the Ideal Nutrition Podcast. My name is Torwen Eerkens and I'm here with my co-host Aidan Muir, and today we're discussing the role of polyphenols in gut health. So to start off with a little bit of background, what actually are polyphenols? Polyphenols are compounds that plants produce. Now they're not vitamins, they're not minerals, and they're also not fibre, but they're what we call secondary plant metabolites. So there are about 10,000 of these, and plants make them for their own reasons, whether that's something like UV protection, keeping insects away, etc., etc. Now they're typically classified by flavonoids or non-flavonoids, and flavonoids are the largest group, which is found in most colourful fruit and veg. They contain things like flavones, flavonols, isoflavonones, and anthocyanins, whereas the non-flavonoids includes things like phenolic acid, lignans, and stilbenes.
Talking about bioavailability now, so the bioavailability is often low, but it can be pretty hugely variable. Some get absorbed less than 1%, while others can be 50% or higher. There are some things we can do to adjust that absorption a little bit. For example, having it alongside dietary fat can increase it. So a common example is having olive oil with vegetables, for example. But most of the absorption occurs in the large intestine. Gut bacteria often breaks these polyphenols down into smaller metabolites, and absorption can actually even differ based on your own personal microbiome, partly due to that too.
Now, they can play a fair few roles in the body, mainly because they act as powerful antioxidants and anti-inflammatory agents. So they can protect cells against damage, they reduce chronic disease risk, they may promote heart health, gut health, and brain health. But as we said, today we're focusing on the gut health benefits specifically.
And they can affect gut health through a variety of means. So the first one I'm going to start with is prebiotic benefits. So since many polyphenols reach the large intestine intact, they can act as food for the bacteria there. This can lead to the increasing growth of certain beneficial bacteria. The most common ones we'd be talking about are lactobacillus and bifidobacteria. And it's similar to fibre in this way, just with a slightly different mechanism.
And that shift then is also often associated with improved microbial diversity and then reduced markers of gut inflammation as well. One of the downstream effects then of this microbial shift is often butyrate production. So butyrate is a short-chain fatty acid that when gut bacteria ferment certain substrates, it acts as a primary fuel source. So bacterial strains, like we just mentioned, bifidobacterium, or whether it's something like lactobacillus, they produce more butyrate. And butyrate in turn does a lot in the body. So it has those anti-inflammatory properties, it helps with colon cell integrity, it can also help with regulating immune function, and so on.
I was looking at research on this because I'm always curious, how much does this matter? Because it's one of those things that it sounds like really good in theory, but I'm like, how much does this matter? So I did look at, I found a systematic review, which I put in the show notes, that found that there's heaps of animal research supporting this quite strongly. Like it clearly does do this, but there still isn't that much human research. What we have in humans looks very promising. We have one huge confounding variable, and the fact is that because a lot of these polyphenols are found in, well, they're all in plant-based foods, in many cases they're also high in fibre. So if you're measuring a human with a high polyphenol intake, you're probably measuring a high fibre intake, which could cause all of these prebiotic benefits and an increase in butyrate as well in many cases.
Which makes a lot of sense. Another way then that polyphenols can help is anti-inflammatory signalling. So they have direct anti-inflammatory effects, and mainly through the inhibition of a pathway that we call the NF-kB, which is essentially a master regulator of inflammatory gene expression in the body. So when this pathway is chronically activated, it may be associated with that low-grade chronic inflammation, which can underpin a huge range of conditions. So lowering the inflammation in this pathway can be beneficial. And
we do have heaps of human randomized control trials on that one too, which is exciting. So we see measurable increases in things like CRP, IL-6, and TNF-A, or alpha, and the effect sizes are often not huge, but they are relevant as well. And the final thing we're going to talk about with the benefits is the gut barrier integrity. So polyphenols appear to like upregulate proteins that reduce intestinal permeability. Other people could call that leaky gut. So like it helps with kind of addressing that. This is relevant to conditions like IBS and IBD. Once again, it's another area where there is a lot of indirect evidence, but not a lot of strong evidence. Like it's not like we're looking at research on do polyphenols dramatically improve symptoms in IBS. Like we haven't really seen anything on that, but indirectly a lot of this stuff looks positive.
And again, a lot of the time when you're looking at overall diet quality, indirectly you're increasing polyphenol intake as well. Cool. Should we move on to chatting about some food sources then?
Sure thing.
So when we're talking about polyphenols, a lot of the time we're talking about colourful fruit and veg, like we said. So this could include things like berries, along with other things including dark chocolate, extra virgin olive oil, green tea, could be things like legumes, red onions, spices, including cloves, star anise, turmeric, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and in many cases, we can measure improvements even just from individual ones. Like if we're talking like blueberries, we see anthocyanins potentially being responsible for an improvement in cognitive function. If we look at dark chocolate and all these other things, we can see a lot of these like measurable improvements and stuff like that. In some cases, I do think aiming for a variety of polyphenol-rich foods makes sense. And then in other cases, I think if you're looking for one specific benefit, you can kind of double down on one as well. When we go back to bioavailability a little bit, there are cases where different approaches from like cooking and storage and stuff like that can impact as well. We can list examples. I'm assuming you've got examples listed as well.
Examples.
All right, we'll go back and forth. I'm going to start off with one. So like cooking tomatoes can like increase the bioavailability of phenolic compounds.
Yes. And then I've got something like fermentation, which is a bit of an interesting one. So kimchi, kefir, sourdough, that sort of thing can also increase the bioavailability, pre-converting them into a more absorbable form.
Frozen berries retain polyphenols well, but if you cook with them, that can cause losses of these polyphenols.
And that's the last one that I've got sort of as well. So there are some heat-sensitive things like potentially flavonoids, which when cooked can reduce their polyphenol content. It makes a lot of sense then as well to consider things like fresh or frozen vegetables if you're storing them long term.
Absolutely. And the last one on my list I had was olive oil. So it's heat stable to a point. Extra virgin olive oil is way higher in polyphenols than just regular olive oil. And the polyphenols often do hold up well under heat to a certain extent as well. But there is a bit of a reduction, and the longer you go for and the higher exposure to high heat, the more of a reduction there is.
One thing then that I mentioned earlier is how we can actually improve the absorption of polyphenols. And one that we most commonly talk about is the fact that fat can improve polyphenol absorption. And the fact that many polyphenols are fat soluble means that eating them alongside a healthy fat like extra virgin olive oil actually helps how much you can absorb. This is potentially also one of the reasons why the Mediterranean diet works quite well as a dietary pattern, because we're looking at things with like vegetables served with olive oil, or often pairing spices with things like fatty foods or fatty fish, which works well.
Another, and I'd say this is possibly the most well-known example, is that curcumin technically is a polyphenol. We don't often like think of it in that category, but it is. And consuming it alongside black pepper massively improves absorption. It's something that's it's not well absorbed at all without black pepper. It is noticeably better absorbed there too. And the last one I had there was vitamin C alongside polyphenols often improves absorption. But the practicality of this is pretty slim because many polyphenol-rich foods already contain vitamin C. There are exceptions to that, of course, but in a lot of cases, this is going to take care of itself.
Practical recommendations for anyone that's listening then. Should we go back and forth with these as well?
I only wrote one, so maybe you start.
Firstly, having that variety of polyphenols makes a difference. So we often come back to that 30 plant foods a week. Of course, this isn't perfect science, but I think having a variety makes sense. So if you want a bit of a number, 30 is often seen as quite a large number, but we do encapsulate things like spices and using that quite freely as well.
Yeah, that's the main one that I had, just is like that diversity and also getting enough quantity. And I do think you can go out of your way to take certain steps to kind of achieve these. Like, for example, if you're buying chocolate, if you've got dark chocolate, going even as far as you're willing to go in terms of the percentage of dark chocolate, like whether it's 70 versus like 80% or something like that, or 80 versus 85%. Most people draw a line somewhere.
I was going to say 70 is max.
But yeah, going with the higher percentage if you can. I think even like little things like drinking green tea and stuff like that is such an easy win. And one thing I do like about nutrition is that, like, on the one hand, I can just be like, oh, just have a good diet, so on and so forth. But like, I obviously read a lot of studies, and there's so many times I'm like reading a study and I'm like, I should probably do that more. Like using the green tea thing as an example, like if you looked at green tea and cognitive function, like there is an improvement. There are so many of these like little things that if you just do a little bit more of, it probably does improve outcomes in different areas of life.
For sure. And adding on to those little swaps, it might be something like normal olive oil for actually buying that extra virgin olive oil if that's a possibility for you. Adding in a little bit more colourful fruit and veg throughout the day on top of meals that you're already having. That makes a lot of sense.
Absolutely. Well, we will wrap up there. So that has been episode 257 of the Ideal Nutrition Podcast. As always, if you have not left a rating and review, we would massively appreciate that.